Welcome to Chapter 9, Charting. The XAM chart is made up of 25 chart types. Functional pieces include markers, scenes, captions, legends, and axes. This section will also cover chart data, binding to XML data, and utilizing effects such as lighting and animation. This chapter contains two labs, XAM Chart Basic and XAM Chart Advanced. Chart types include the bubble, scatter, and scatter line charts and their 3D variations. These present data on an X, Y, and optional Z coordinate space. Pie, donut, and their 3D variations present one series of data in the same manner. Point, line, spline, and their 3D variations present multiple series of data using dots on an axis. And lastly, stock and candlestick charts present data also using chart parameters. Area charts include the standard area chart, stacked 100 area, and 3D variations of each. The area chart type draws a line chart and fills the area below the line with a color. The fill color can be specified. The area chart emphasizes the amount of change over a period of time. Multiple series of data can be used to visually compare multiple items. This chart can show the relationship of parts to a whole by displaying the total of the plotted values. Column, stacked 100 column, cylinder, and stacked 100 cylinder and their 3D variations use vertical bars or cylinders to present multiple series of data. Column and cylinder charts show the changes in a data series over time. Multiple series present a comparison among multiple items. The types of items are arranged horizontally and data values are plotted vertically to emphasize variation over time. The cylinder variation of this chart draws cylinders for the columns when rendered in 3D mode. Bar, stacked 100 bar, stacked cylinder bar, and stacked 100 cylinder bar and their 3D variations use horizontal bars or cylinders to present multiple series of data. Bar and cylinder bar charts show the changes in a data series over time. When used with multiple series of data, it presents a comparison among multiple items. Types of items are arranged vertically and data values are plotted horizontally to emphasize variation over time. The cylinder variation is the same as bar chart with a cylinder view in 3D mode. Bubble, scatter, scatter line, and their 3D variations present data on an X, Y, and optional Z coordinate space. 3D variations of this chart will utilize the Z coordinate. The X and Y coordinates of the data marker are determined by two data values in 2D, while a third data value is used for the Z coordinate in 3D. These are mapped to a 2D or 3D coordinate space, depending on the type of chart declared in the series declaration. Pie, donut, and their 3D variations present data in a familiar and popular visual representation of data. Pie and donut charts are perfect for providing a quick visual comparison of data. Unlike other XAM charts, these charts can only show a single series of data at a time. However, they are useful for determining which item or items in a series are most significant. Point, line, spline, and their 3D variations emphasize the amount of change over a period of time. Data points are plotted for one or more series of data using evenly spaced intervals. Line and spline charts are connected with lines or curves to emphasize the relationships between the points. Stock and candlestick charts are used to plot stock prices. These are the only XAM charts with no 3D variation. The stock and candlestick charts show a stock's high, low, open, and close prices for each date specified. Several of the charts have a stacked chart variation. Stacked charts provide a two-dimensional shorthand for reading three-dimensional data. For stacked charts, rather than having multiple dimensions of data positioned side by side, each series of data is expressed stacked in the same column or row. Another chart variation is the stacked 100 chart. Stacked 100 charts are stacked charts which present the cumulative effect of the data as it reaches 100%. This chart type is excellent for comparing data within multiple series. A chart marker is a visual element that displays the value of a data point in a chart scene. Adding markers to your XAMPP chart will help end users immediately identify a data point's value, even if the value falls between major grid lines or minor grid lines. The marker object has various properties you can set to customize its appearance. The scene is the area around a chart's layout or grid. This area can be repositioned as well as be drawn with a border. The chart caption is a header title which appears over the chart. This text element can be positioned and styled. The chart legend is a box which enumerates series or data point labels with colors to help users read chart data. The pie and donut charts will display a list of assigned data point labels, while other charts will enumerate the titles of each series assigned to a chart. The chart layout within a scene, the caption, and the legend can all be repositioned or hidden using margin, margin type, and visible properties. Each element contains these properties. Setting margin type to % causes the 4 numbers in margin to be used to specify position based on a percentage of the space on the top, left, bottom, and right margins. The axes are the lines used for plotting points in a chart. 2D charts plot their data on 2 primary axes, primary X and primary Y. 3D charts must plot their data on 3 primary axes, which are primary X, primary Y, and primary Z. Secondary axes can also be set on the opposite side of the primary axes. These axes are secondary X and secondary Y. 3D charts do not support secondary axes. Here's an example of a chart with a caption, legend, and primary X and Y axis with the Y axis striped. Notice that the Y axis labels are angled and have been formatted to display commas. The data point class defines values and labels for all charts except bubble, scatter, scatterline, candlestick, and stock. The XAML here shows an example of the data point. Bubble, scatter, and scatterline charts utilize chart parameters for positioning each point. An example of the use of chart parameters is shown in the XAML here. Stock and candlestick charts also utilize chart parameters. In this example, chart parameters are assigned to a data point to specify a stock's open, high, low, and close values. And it's time for the first lab of the chapter, XAMPP Chart Basic. Welcome to the XAMPP Chart Basic lab. In this lab, we'll learn basic use of the XAMPP chart control for presenting data to end users. This video is for Task 1 of Exercise 1, and in this task, we'll add the user control to the project and create a tab for it in the XAMPP Doc Manager control. We're going to start in Visual Studio, and in the Solution Explorer window, we'll right-click on the View folder and select Add, then User Control. In the Add New Item dialog window, we'll verify the user control template is selected and enter XAMPP Chart Basic in the Name field. Next, we'll click Add to close the dialog window and add the user control to the project. In the XAML view of XAMPP-CHART-BASIC.XAML, change the width and height properties to auto. Next, let's open window1.xaml. In either the XAML or Design view, we'll select the tab group pane element in XAMPP Doc Manager 1. In the Properties window, we'll click the ellipsis button next to the Items property. In the Collection Editor dialog window, we'll verify the content pane is selected in the item dropdown and then click the Add button to add one content pane object to the collection. After verifying the content pane is selected, we'll set its Allow Docking property to false, its Allow Floating Only property to false, its header property to XAMPP Chart Basic, and its name property to Chart Basic pane. We can then click OK to close the dialog window and add the content pane. Then we need to build the solution, and once that's done, we'll add a XAMPP Chart Basic user control to the XAMPP Chart Basic content pane we just added. And that completes Exercise 1. Welcome to Task 1 of Exercise 2 of the XAMPP Chart Basic Lab. In this task, we'll add some basic series data to the XAMPP chart. We'll start in the XAML view of XAMPP-CHART-BASIC.XAML, and first we'll add a declaration for the Infragistics chart XML namespace named IG chart. Next, we can add a XAMChart control to the root grid element and set its name property to XAMChart1. Let's select XAMChart1, and in the Properties window, click the ellipsis button next to the Series Collection property. Then in the Collection Editor dialog window, we'll click the Add button to add a new series element to the collection. We'll select the new series element, and then in the Properties list, set its chart type to column, set label to sales, set fill to red, and set stroke to black. Then continuing in the Properties list, we'll click the ellipsis button next to the Data Points collection, which will open a second dialog window. In the new dialog window, we'll click the Add button 5 times to add 5 data point objects to the collection. We're going to set the label and value of each data point. The first one will be John with a value of 2,500, the second will be Bob with a value of 5,000, the third will be Mary with a value of 4,500, the fourth will be Joe with a value of 6,600, and the last will be Emily with a value of 3,700. And then we'll click OK to close the dialog window. Back in the Series Collection dialog window, we'll verify the series object is selected, and then click the ellipsis button next to the Chart Parameters collection property. This will open the Collection Editor Chart Parameters dialog window. In this new dialog window, we'll add one chart parameter object to the collection. After verifying it's selected, we'll set its type to rectangle rounding, and we'll set its value to 5. Then we can click OK in both dialog windows to close them. The design view of XAMChartBasic.xaml should display some chart data. Next, in the XAML view of XAMChartBasic.xaml, we'll set the marker property of the series element to a new marker object, and then we'll select the new marker object, and in the Properties window, set foreground to black, set format to value:(C), set label distance to 0, set marker size to 0, and set type to none. And the design view of XAMChartBasic.xaml should now have a marker on each column. And this completes Task 1 of Exercise 2. Welcome to Task 2 of Exercise 1 of the XAMChart Basic Lab. In this task, we'll configure the X and Y axes of the XAMChart control. Starting in the XAML or design view of XAMChart Basic, we're going to select XAMChart1. In the Properties window, we'll click the ellipsis button next to the Axes Collection property. In the Collection Editor dialog window, we'll click the Add button twice to add 2 axis objects to the collection. Select the top axis entry, and in the Properties list, verify its axis type is set to primary X. Then select the bottom axis entry, and set its auto range to false, set axis type to primary Y, set maximum to 8,000, set minimum to 1,000, and set unit to 1,000. Then click OK to close the Collection Editor dialog window. In the XAML view of XAMChartBasic.xaml, let's set the major grid line property of the first axis object, the primary x-axis, to a new mark object with its visible property set to false. Then we'll set the label property of the first axis object to a new label object with its angle property set to -45. And the design view of XAMChart Basic should now have no grid lines associated with the x-axis, and the labels on the x-axis should now be at a 45-degree angle. Next, back in the XAML view, we'll set the major grid line property of the second axis object, which is the primary y-axis, to a new mark object with its visible property set to false. And then we'll set the label property of that axis object to a new label object with its format property set to a currency format. Next, we'll set the minor tick mark property of the second axis object to a new mark object and set its stroke to black and its unit to 500. The design view of XAMChart Basic should now have no grid lines, it should have tick marks on the y-axis, and the y-axis values should show currencies. And this completes Task 2 of Exercise 2. Welcome to Task 3 of Exercise 2 of the XAMChart Basic Lab. In this task, we'll configure the legend and caption of the XAMChart control. Starting in the XAML view of XAMChartBasic.xaml, let's set the caption property of XAMChart1 to a new caption object. Then we'll select the caption element, and in the Properties window, we'll set its font family to Arial, its font size to 40, set font stretch to expanded, set font weight to bold, and set text to simple WPF chart. Next, we'll set the legend property of XAMChart1 to a new legend element. And then we'll select the legend element, and in the Properties window, we'll set its margin to 70/22/014 and set its margin type to %. And now the design view of XAMChart Basic should show a caption and a larger legend. And this completes Task 3 of Exercise 2. Welcome to Task 4 of Exercise 2 of the XAMChart Basic Lab. In this task, we'll implement a style that changes the color of the columns in the XAMChart control. Starting in the XAML view of XAMChartBasic.xaml, let's add a new style object to the user control element's resources collection and set its target type property to a data point. Then we're going to add a new trigger object to the styles triggers collection and set its property to isMouseOver and set its value to true. Then we'll add a setter object to the trigger element and set its property to fill and its value to orange. We can now run the project. And XAMChart 1 should display inside the XAMChart Basic tab and be sized to fit the window. Moving your mouse over a column will turn the column orange. And this completes the XAMChart Basic lab. The XAMChart can also be bound to XML data. As with any WPF XML binding, XML data provider is utilized. Data source points the chart to the data, and data mapping assigns XML data to XAMChart series data points. An example is shown on the slide here. XAMChart also supports animation and transform effects. Additionally, XAMChart lights its 3D charts with a default lighting scheme, which can be overridden and animated to create stunning visual effects. The XAMChart.animation property provides the means for animating a chart. The animation property sequential will cause each series in a chart to draw one after the other. Setting sequential to false will cause all items to draw at once. Finally, acceleration and deceleration can be defined to accelerate the drawing of each item. As with standard WPF acceleration and deceleration, the two values form a ratio where the sum of both must equal 1.0 or less. And it's time for the last lab of the chapter, XAMChart Advanced. Welcome to the XAMChart Advanced lab. In this lab, we'll learn how to utilize some of the more advanced features of the XAMChart control, including data binding, hit testing, and transforms. This video is for Task 1 of Exercise 1, and in this task, we'll add the user control to the project and create a tab for it in the XAMDoc Manager. We'll start in Visual Studio, and in the Solution Explorer window, we'll right-click on the View folder and select Add, and then User Control. In the Add New Item dialog window, we'll verify the user control template is selected and enter XAMChart Advanced in the name field. We can then click Add to add the control to the project. In the XAML view of XAMChart Advanced.xaml, first we'll change the width and height properties to auto. And we'll select the tab group pane element in XAMDoc Manager 1, and then in the Properties window, click the ellipsis button next to the item's property. In the Collection Editor dialog window, we'll verify the Content pane is selected in the Item dropdown, and then click the Add button to add a Content pane object to the collection. After verifying the new Content pane is selected, set its Allow Docking to False, Allow Floating Only to False, set its header to XAMChart Advanced, and set its name to Chart Advanced Pane. We can then click OK in the dialog window to add the content pane. Let's go ahead and build our solution. And when that's complete, we can add a XAMChart Advanced user control to the XAMChart Advanced content pane element. And this completes Task 1 of Exercise 1. Welcome to Task 2 of Exercise 1 of the XAMChart Advanced lab. In this task, we'll set up the layout of the user control. We're going to start by saving our solution in Visual Studio and then switching over to Expression Blend. Once XAMChart Advanced.xaml is open in Expression Blend, we'll select the grid element in the Objects and Timeline panel. In the Properties panel, under Layout, let's expand the Advanced Properties and click the ellipsis button next to the Column Definitions collection. In the Column Definition Collection Editor dialog window, click Add Another Item twice to add 2 column definition objects to the collection. Then in the Items list, select the first column definition, and in the Properties list, set its width to 30 pixel. Next, select the second column definition and verify its width is set to 1 star. Then click OK to close the dialog window. Continuing in the Layout category, let's click the ellipsis button next to the Row Definitions Collection property. In the Row Definition Collection Editor dialog window, we'll click Add Another Item twice to add 2 row definition objects to the collection. In the Items list, select the first row definition, and in the Properties list, verify its height is set to 1 star. Then we'll select the second row definition and set its height to 30 pixel. Then we can click OK to close the dialog window. Next, in the Tools panel, we'll find the Slider tool, and then double-click it to add a slider control to the grid element. In the Properties panel, we'll set its name to Slider X. Then moving to the Layout category, we'll set its width to 200, its height to 22, its row to 1, its column to 1, its horizontal alignment to left, its vertical alignment to center, and all margin properties are set to 0. Moving to the Common Properties category, we'll set the maximum to 360, and then we'll expand the advanced properties and set interval to 10. Next, back in the Tools panel, we'll double-click the Slider tool again to add a second slider control to the grid element. Then in the Properties panel, we'll set its name to Slider Y. Moving to the Layout category, we'll set its width to 22, its height to 200, its horizontal alignment to center, its vertical alignment to bottom, and we'll set all its margin properties to 0. Moving to the Common Properties category, we'll set its maximum to 360, its orientation to vertical, and we'll expand its advanced properties and set interval to 10. In the Tools panel, we'll double-click the Text Block tool to add a new text block control to the grid element. When the text becomes editable, clear the existing text and press the Escape key to leave edit mode. In the Properties panel, set the name property of the text block control to data point value text. Then in the Layout category, set its width to 125, its height to 22, its row to 1, its column to 1, its horizontal alignment to right, its vertical alignment to center, its margin right to 15, and all other margin properties to 0. Now we'll save our solution in Expression Blend, and then right-click on XamChartAdvanced.xaml in the Projects panel and select Edit in Visual Studio in the context menu. This will take us back to Visual Studio, and when it prompts you to reload the project, click Reload or Yes to All, depending on what it asks. This completes Exercise 1. Welcome to Task 1 of Exercise 2 of the XamChart Advanced Lab. In this task, we'll add the XamChart control and bind it to some data. Starting in the XAML view of XamChartAdvanced.xaml, add a declaration for the Infragistics chart XML namespace named IGChart. We can then add a XamChart control to the root grid element. Then we can select the XamChart control, and in the Properties window, we'll set its name to XamChart1, its grid column to 1, and View 3D to True. Continuing in the Properties window, we'll click the ellipsis button next to the Series Collection property to open the Collection Editor Series dialog window. In the dialog window, click Add 3 times to add 3 series objects to the collection. Select the top series entry, and in the Properties list, set its chart type to column and its label to Java. For the second series entry, set its chart type to column and its label to ActiveX. And for the third series entry, set its chart type to column and its label to .NET. Then click OK to close the collection editor dialog window. In the XAML view of chartadvanced.xaml, bind the Java series to some data by setting the data source to bind to the bar column data property of the view model and setting its data mapping to value equal Java and label equal week. We'll then do the same thing for the ActiveX series, but using a value of ActiveX in the data mapping. Then we'll do the same thing for the .NET series, but using a value of net in the data mapping. And then we can run the project. Now if we click the XAML Chart Advanced tab in the application, the XAML Chart control should have a 3D view of the three series of data. The slider controls in the bottom left of the user control won't be functional until a later task. And this concludes Task 1 of Exercise 2. Welcome to Task 2 of Exercise 2 of the XAML Chart Advanced Lab. In this task, we'll add simple animation to the series data in the XAML Chart control. Starting in the XAML view of XAML Chart Advanced.xaml, let's set the animation property of the Java series to a new animation object with its begin time set to all zeros, its duration set to 0.2, and we'll set sequential to false. Next, we'll do the same thing for the ActiveX series, but we'll use a begin time of 0.1, the duration will still be 0.2, and we'll still set sequential to false. Lastly, we'll do the same thing for the .NET series, but we'll set begin time to 0.2, while duration stays at 0.2, and we'll set sequential to true for this one. And then we can run the project. When the XAML Chart Advanced user control loads, the column should now animate into view. The .NET series will animate each of its columns in sequence. And this completes Task 2 of Exercise 2. Welcome to Task 3 of Exercise 2 of the XAML Chart Advanced Lab. And this task will add functionality to hit test mouse clicks on the XAML chart. Starting in the XAML view of XAML Chart Advanced.xaml, we'll add an event handler for the mouse down event of XAML Chart 1. The event handler should be called XAML Chart 1 _ mouse down. Next, we'll right-click on the event text and select Navigate to Event Handler to go to the code behind file. Then at the top of the code behind file, we'll enter the Infragistics Windows Chart namespace. Next, in our mouse down event handler, first we'll add code to retrieve the hit test information from XAML Chart 1 and attempt to cast the object that was clicked on to a data point. Next, we'll add a conditional statement to check if data point is null. Then inside the conditional statement, we'll set the text property of the text block that was created in exercise 1 to the data point's value. Lastly, below the conditional statement, we'll set the event as handled. And then we can run the project. Now if we click the XAMChart Advanced tab, clicking anywhere on the XAMChart control will fire the event. Clicking on a column will display the column's value in the text block control. And this completes task 3 of exercise 2. Welcome to task 4 of exercise 2 of the XAMChart Advanced lab. In this task, we'll configure the slider controls to rotate the XAMChart. Starting in the XAML view of XAMChartAdvanced.xaml, we'll set the Transform 3D property of XAMChart1 to a new Transform 3D group object. Then we'll add a Rotate Transform 3D object to the Transform 3D group object. Next, we'll set the rotation property of the Rotate Transform 3D object to a new Axis Angle Rotation 3D object with its axis set to 0, 1, 0 and its angle bound to the Rotate X property on the view model. Then we'll add a second Rotate Transform 3D object with its axis set to 1, 0, 0 and its angle bound to the Rotate Y property on the view model. Next, we'll locate slider X in the XAML and bind its value property to the Rotate X property in the view model. And for slider Y, we'll bind its value property to the Rotate Y property in the view model. And we can then run the application. You can now use the slider controls on the XAMChart Advanced tab to rotate the XAMChart control. And this completes the XAMChart Advanced lab.